Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here. This video is going to be a presentation that Jimm Kjelgaard gave at the Hutchings Museum in June of 2026. The subject of his presentation is UFO or UAP disclosure. It's kind of entitled Disclosure 101 because at this time in human history, a lot is coming out that seems to indicate we're not alone. And there's congressional hearings, there's government files about UFOs and UAPs being released, and the discussion is moving forward, hopefully towards an eventual entire disclosure of whatever the real truth is. So there's some people who are very into researching this topic, know the history, the background, and are keeping up to speed with this day by day. But most of us are not. Most of us are busy with daily life. And so to just share with somebody, hey, this important congressional hearing just happened. Well, what's the background that led up to this? So many of us got together and were discussing this problem, and Jimm was willing to put together an incredible presentation. It's long, watch the whole thing. It's concise, even though it's long, because this is a huge topic going back decades and actually even centuries. And so Jimm does an incredible job of step by step leading you up to all the way to today, even down to the actual day, because we're getting UFO files currently. So special thanks to everybody who put this together, and especially Jimm for going ahead and doing all this research and putting together this incredible presentation. Again, watch the whole thing. And this will give you a framework, a grounding by which you can understand what has led to where we are right now in history. And I highly recommend that you savor this moment in history, because if it is true that we're not alone, and if that comes out and is publicly known worldwide, you watching this right now will be part of the generation of people who lived on both sides, a time when we did not know this to be true, and when we did know it to be true. Everybody coming after would then be in a time of history where everybody knew it was true. So hope you enjoyed this incredible presentation, and Jimm does a wonderful job. So let's go ahead and listen to Disclosure 101.
Go ahead and get started. My name is Ben Woodruff, and I'm just going to do a quick little introduction here. We appreciate you all coming out. We appreciate that people care about this topic. And we'd like to thank the Hutchings Museum for being willing to host this here and let it be for free. Now, if you want to look around the museum after, which I highly recommend, it's an incredible collection, then there is a charge. You just pay up front for that. But this is free, and again, we thanks Leah and the Hutchings Museum for making that possible. we appreciate it. So on this topic, so first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about this topic itself really quick. I want you to think about the fact that if this is all true, and again, if it's scientific mind, you have to put if in front of everything. Even if it's something you believe, you're like, well, if this is true, I get it. But if this is all true, and the disclosure that we see unfolding at a governmental level is coming out, then you need to be aware you are sitting at a very strange time in human history. From before there is what if, maybe you have a personal experience, and the after, people living in a time where, oh yeah, of course, yeah, this is real, this happened, and yeah, we're not alone in the universe. You are the last of the people to be able to sit on both sides. Anybody coming else after you will have grown up in a world, like growing up in a world where we have smartphones, where we have GPS for everywhere you go. You remember when you had to use a map? You know, oh, take out the map program. And it's like now you just ask your phone where to go, what's the best route. Kids don't know that. The kids in the coming generations, hopefully, are not going to know our perspective. So savor this time, savor this transitional time, and look around. What do people see? What do people fear? What do people get excited about? Just be present, because in all of human history, if all this unfolding is what it seems to be, this is epic, this is huge, and you need to be able to share this, your personal perspective, with the rising generations to come. What was it like before in the old days when it was stigmatized? When if you mentioned, I saw something in the sky, they said, oh, little green man, oh, you're drinking too much, oh, a tinfoil hat. These words that the government has put out there for us to say to stigmatize this, that stuff's going away. and it's exciting. It's really unique. So the problem is most people do not know this topic in depth. Maybe you all do, a lot of people don't. And so they're just starting to barely hear about congressional hearings. Oh wait, what, they're talking about UFOs in Congress? And they're just getting snippets. And so Jimm, the man, the myth, the legend, was willing to put together basically a disclosure 101 to catch people up. Like, let's just sum this up, just catch you up. So we're also recording it. We're gonna have this online so that you can share it with other people and say, hey, look, you just wanna know the basics so you can get caught up to what's happening, then you can do it. Jimm is an incredible man. He's passionate about this subject. He, and along with many of his incredible friends, run a podcast called The Soul of the Unexplained, and you got to check it out. They do an incredible job. It's great. Jimm is also an accomplished musician and in several bands and decades of experience in that field. He's awesome. So we're really excited for Jimm to be able to give this presentation. So we'll all pay good attention and listen, and we'll have questions and answers at the end. So let's give Jimm a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much to the Hutchings Museum for having me out today, and to Ben for setting this up. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules here on a Saturday afternoon to come and learn about Disclosure 101 and what it is and why it matters, and presented by the guy with the really funny last name and the almost as funny first name. That's right, I got 2 M's in my first name, and I'll tell you a quick story as to why. I'm actually named after a famous children's author in the 1950s named Jimm Kjelgaard. Of course, he only had 1 M in his first name. But back in 1962, Walt Disney actually made a movie off of one of his books called Big Red. So I still, when I was growing up, in fact, as recently as about 5 years ago, I still periodically get fan mail from both school teachers and children, and sometimes older folks, thinking that I am my famous uncle. So I added the second M to my first name to differentiate myself from my uncle when I began publishing music and doing stuff like that. So that's where the Jimm comes from there. So let's go ahead and dive right in here. So UAP Disclosure 101. So as Ben alluded to, folks, just think, if there's nothing to see, as the government has told the people of the United States for decades, there should be nothing to hide, right? So the other thing is that governments don't generally classify things that don't exist, right? Now, you can say, obviously, we have a reason to keep secrets. We have military secrets that we don't want our adversaries, and sometimes not even our allies. So that's not to say that we don't have a need to keep secrets as a nation. But something as, something such as the UAP or UFO phenomena, if it didn't exist, then why classify it? And we're going to talk about that for a little bit. So let's start off with unidentified anomalous phenomena. What does UAP stand for? And as you can see, according to AARO, which is our nation's current government organization that investigates UFOs in an official capacity, UAP is referring to observations of events in the air, sea, or space that cannot be immediately identified or explained. Used by governments and scientists as a broader, less stigmatized alternative to UFOs, they describe objects displaying advanced, unknown, or anomalous flight characteristics. While technically similar to UFO, UAP is the new preferred taxonomy or classification term to move away from the multi-generational cultural stigma and the quote-unquote little green men that is associated with the old term UFO. So, of course, favoring a more neutral scientific approach with that. So, to put it simply, UFO equals UAP, right? So, next, the big question, well, are UAP real? Are UFOs real? And really what it comes down to is unidentified anomalous phenomena, formerly known as UFOs, are, in fact, considered real in that they are detected, they are documented and officially acknowledged to exist as physical, tangible objects by the US government and scientific organizations. The first official acknowledgement from our government happened on December 17th, 2017 in the New York Times. How many of you remember when that article came out? All right, a couple of you. How many of you had no idea that the New York Times ran an article wherein the government acknowledged that UAPs were real? Good, glad to see it. So the article was entitled, "Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program." And the article was compiled by Ralph Blumenthal, who is a longtime famous writer for the investigative reporter for the New York Times, as well as Leslie Kane and Helene Curtis. And it was published on 16 December 2017. Little summation of the article is the article revealed the existence of a program called ATIP, and we're going to get into that in just a bit, and was accompanied by 3 videos that purported to be official US Navy videos showing UAP. Now, the Pentagon didn't officially confirm the authenticity of those 3 videos until 2020. So the government was a little slow to respond and say, okay, you got us, yes, those videos are real. And those 3 videos have come to be known as the Tic Tac, the Go Fast, and the Gimbal. And I'm sure most of us have probably seen examples of that. So UAP disclosure, what exactly is UAP disclosure? So UAP disclosure refers to the official public release of government-held information regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena. It aims to bring transparency to military sightings, declassify historical documents, and address claims that authorities are hiding evidence of non-human intelligence or advanced technologies. Thank you very much to Google for that one. So here are some of the key areas of what UAP disclosure is. The first of which is the UAPDA. That stands for the UAP Disclosure Act. And that is a landmark proposed congressional legislation designed to mandate federal agencies identify, declassify, and transfer all UAP-related records to the National Archives and Records Administration. Now, there have been multiple UAPDAs that have been rolled into what they call the National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically part of the budget every year. And so far, only small parts of the UAPDA have been signed into law. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. The next one is disclosure movement, and that is a grassroots and socio-political movement of individuals, researchers, and whistleblowers advocating for the release of classified information. So that's us. That's the regular good folks of the United States of America that just have an interest or passion in this. Every one of you that is here is technically part of that grassroots movement. Then there's the scientific inquiry and the effort by institutions like NASA to approach sightings using unclassified, hard data rather than speculation. And finally, federal mandates, directives from US leadership ordering executive departments and intelligence agencies to expeditiously review and release previously unrevealed UAP records to the public. So, is UAP disclosure a singular event, or is it something that just happens gradually over time? Now, a lot of times we like to think that UAP disclosure is going to happen, in the form that it's always been portrayed in TV shows or movies or comic books. Hopefully nothing like an Independence Day, because that would not be fun. But barring the phenomenon itself appearing to the masses and the proverbial UFO landing on the south lawn of the White House, UAP disclosure is not going to be a singular event. It's a gradual process that takes time. So some would argue that the modern age of disclosure began in the late 1970s with the resurfacing of the Roswell incident. How many of you have heard of Roswell and how it ties into UFOs? Good, good. So while others credit the New York Times article from December of 2017 as the genesis of the modern disclosure movement. The correct answer is it's entirely subjective, okay? And it's open to personal interpretation of what constitutes disclosure. So whether you think it began with the New York Times article or with the congressional hearings that began in 2023, it's really sixes. The important thing is that we're finally starting to get it. So let's dive into the phenomena itself. Now, the phenomena is actually much older than many of us might suspect. There are accounts of what we would call UAP or UFOs, going clear back to the ancient Hindu scriptures talking of exotic craft flying in the skies, piloted by what they would call godlike beings. If you're familiar with any of the ancient Hindu scriptures, these would be the Vimanas that they talk about. And that's several thousands of years back. And then, of course, we have the ancient American petroglyphs right here in Utah, McConkey Ranch. Has anybody been to McConkey Ranch? That place is awesome, and it's so great because it's just outside of Vernal, and I'm going to show you a picture of what one of those petroglyphs look like. But it's a great place right here in Utah, and it just is one of the coolest places. And Ben, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's even free admission to go there. So talk about a great day trip to take. And then, of course, there's also the story of Ezekiel's wheel in the Bible. And you can read all about that in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 10. You didn't know there was going to be a scripture chase today, did you? So this is a picture that I took several years ago, well, about 5 years ago when I was at McConkey Ranch. And I don't know if you can pick it out too well here, but these are estimated to be somewhere between 800 and 2,000 years old. The ancient Native American inhabitants that were in the area of the Uinta Basin made a record of the things that they saw and some of what their traditions were. Now, obviously, the only person or the people that know what these petroglyphs mean are the people that carved them thousands of years ago. So we're just simply kind of trying to make sense out of it with our modern day terms. But as you can see, perhaps in some of these images right here, they have what we would call, it looks like they kind of have like a helmet on and some maybe antennas or something spiking out. I have a few cousins, I think, that look like the guy there on the right. But, you know, that's New Yorkers. We're kind of weird like that. But, so exactly how long has this phenomena been going on? Well, the Roswell incident is widely considered the genesis of the current UFO UAP topic. It was not the first anomalous case that was reported in the United States. Many UFO researchers, including David Grush, and that's a name that some of you might be familiar with, and we'll talk about him in a bit, but David Grush himself claimed that the true beginning of the modern UFO/UAP era actually began in Magenta, Italy in June of 1933 with the crash and subsequent retrieval of an unknown craft by the Mussolini regime. And we'll talk about that in a minute in more detail. So, in 1947, shortly after the Roswell incident took place, there were two major events that happened in United States history in 1947. Not talking about Roswell, but can anybody guess what those two major events were in the autumn of 1947? Any guess?
In the States?
Huh?
In the States?
In the United States, yes. So, in 1947, we had the creation of the United States Air Force, which then became its own branch of service. And it was also the formation of the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA was officially started in 1947, along with the United States Air Force. So, a document I'm going to show you right here is available to view in the National Archives. And this should be, anybody that is not aware of this particular document, I want you to pay close attention to this. It's called the Cutler-Twining Memo. It was composed in 23rd of September 1947 by General Nathaniel F. Twining of the United States Army Air Force. And remember, it was called the Army Air Force before it became the United States Air Force. It is an official document kept in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. It states that UFO phenomenon is real and not visionary or fictitious. And that line right there is an actual quote from the document. It describes the appearance and flight behaviors of observed UFOs by American servicemen. And I'm going to pop that document up here right now for you to see. Now, you probably can't make out too well what it says where some of you are, but this line right here clearly says the phenomena reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. So as early as September 1947, which was just 2 months after Roswell occurred, you had one of the highest ranking generals in the United States come up with this memo. And in that memo, he certified whatever these things are, they are real. They are not fictitious, they are not illusions or hallucinations. And that's specific. The next thing we have is something called the Robertson Panel that was commissioned in 1953. The CIA commissioned the Robertson Panel, and this was the beginning of what we would call the cover-up. This is the beginning of the United States government or certain agencies within our government purposely obfuscating the truth and covering up what is really true. And so it cites public panic and anxiety from UFO sightings as a threat to the orderly functioning of government. And it cites that the UFO topic might be exploited by one of our geopolitical enemies for psychological warfare on the American public. It's kind of funny, that last little bit there, that their concern is that another nation might use the UFO phenomena to begin conducting psychological warfare on the United States citizens. The reason why that's funny is because that's exactly what the CIA began doing at the behest of this particular panel. The CIA begins a PSYOP on the American public, and from 1947 to 1952, less than 20% of UFO incidents were classified as, quote, unknown, including 33% of those that were deemed to be of excellent quality. In 1953, the CIA instituted a sweeping government policy to debunk UFOs and culturally stigmatize the topic via print, television, and film media. And unfortunately, that is a policy that still continues largely to this day. We are finally starting to see that wall crumble down because now even mainstream media organizations have been forced to honestly pay attention and acknowledge, hey, there really is something to all of this. But by 1955, only 3% of UFO cases were quote unquote unknown. So the CIA, working in concert with the Air Force, began this psychological operation. And that's why, if you go back and watch, I think Ben mentioned one time, it might have been on my podcast, or if you get a chance, folks, there's a great podcast out there called Area 52, and Mr. Ben Woodruff was on that about a week ago. And the great thing is that I think Ben mentioned that there's this great episode of the Flintstones. Now, the Flintstones began a little before my time. I know they started when my brother who came all the way from Idaho today to see me, so thank you. But I'm sure you remember when the Flintstones came out. And there was this little green alien, and so that was kind of where it entered the lexicon of our culture of little green men. And if you go back and think of all the UFO movies that came out in basically anything after 1953, which is when the bulk of them came out. The 1950s was a huge time for those kind of movies in the culture. We had movies like, It Came from Outer Space, War of the Worlds, and one of my favorites, The Day the Earth Stood Still, right? I see some of you out there, you guys are sci-fi buffs like I am. But there was an orchestrated campaign conducted by the CIA to basically stigmatize the whole idea that there was not only life elsewhere in the universe, but that maybe that life has found its way here to planet Earth. To say nothing of the stuff that our men and women that were serving in the military had been seeing on the battlefield since World War II and into Korea and even Vietnam. So that PSYOP began in 1953. So after that, we had 3 major programs that were sponsored by the United States government to investigate UFOs. Project Grudge, Project Sign, and Project Blue Book. So Project Sign, was also known as Project Saucer, was formed in 1948 by, again, General Nathan Twining, and it was the first serious investigation of the UFO phenomena. And aside from the fact that it was determined that whatever these things are, they're real, that was about the only real substantive finding of Project Sign. Project Sign was followed up by Project Grudge. And if you think that that name is a little tongue-in-cheek, you're absolutely right. Because the CIA had a grudge with these pesky little things that were flying in and out and causing all kinds of havoc and making people think that, oh, there's aliens everywhere. But from February to December of 1949, Project Grudge was intended to alleviate public anxiety over UFOs and persuade the public that UFOs constituted nothing unusual or extraordinary. And then the big one that most people might have heard of is Project Blue Book. Anybody familiar with Project Blue Book? Heard that mentioned in the past? So that was the big one. That was the most high-profile, public-facing UFO investigation project that the government had, and it ran from March of 1952 to December of 1969. Project Blue Book concluded, ultimately, that UFOs do not pose a threat to national security. UFOs do not exhibit advanced technology and are likely misidentifications of mundane objects. Lastly, it concluded that UFOs are not extraterrestrial in origin, and there is no proof that ET life actually exists. And part of the reason for that is because of this, the Condon Report. The Condon Report was kind of set up to purposely torpedo Project Blue Book. And it was funded by the United States Air Force from 1966 to 1968 at the University of Colorado. I'm looking at you, John, Colorado. It's all your fault, man.
Not my fault.
It's widely regarded as the report that killed Project Blue Book and public-facing official UFO/UAP investigation for decades. It concluded, the Condon Report, that UFOs have no basis in reality, and there is no scientific merit in committing resources and time to further investigation. Now, what's particularly telling is a comment that Edward Condon, who was the famed physicist, the man that the report is named after, he said this in an interview. He said, "UFOs are not real. Of course, I'm not supposed to arrive at that conclusion for another year. Ha, ha, ha." So, as you can see, the outcome of the Condon Report was already predetermined. There was no real investigation. It was just the CIA and the Air Force saying, look, we're getting an awful lot of people that are bothering us, using up our resources, reporting things, and we are getting tired of it. So debunk it all, shoot it all down, whatever the cost. And that's exactly what happened. And so that leads us to the Bolender or the Bolender memo of 1969, written October 20th of 1969 by Brigadier General Carroll H. Bolender. And his recommendation is that Blue Book be terminated immediately with extreme prejudice. He admits that the most critical, or rather the cases that couldn't be rationally explained away, were actually not sent to the Blue Book team for review. Think about that. This Brigadier General is saying, well, all the really good stuff, the stuff that we genuinely can't classify and can't prosaically explain, we didn't even send that to the Project Blue Book investigators. Now you tell me that that's not done with intent. Also, quote, reports of UFOs that could affect national security are not sent to the Blue Book system. So there you have a brigadier general admitting, and this memo is also in the National Archives for any of you to research and find, and he says we have to kill off Blue Book immediately because we don't like where it's headed. We've got to protect the secrets, and we've got plenty of things that we can't explain away, and so we're not even going to send that to the people that are supposed to investigate it. So after Blue Book is terminated in 1969, it kind of goes quiet within the government. But then in the 1970s, a little bit of a reawakening of sorts happens, and it comes in the most interesting form. The government essentially goes silent to the public regarding UFOs following the termination of Blue Book in '69, and wide interest in the topic reignites in 1978 with the publishing and the release of the book The Roswell Incident in 1978. Furthermore, anybody that grew up in the 1970s or 1980s, public interest is rekindled in the late 1970s due to movies such as Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This other movie that I heard was kind of popular, Star Wars or something like that. And then the original Battlestar Galactica, which also came out in 1978. So all of a sudden, movies about space and about aliens and people living on other worlds kind of became front and center. And that began in the late 1970s. So here we're going to start with the fun part of my presentation. Prominence UFO UAP incidents from 1933 clear up to today. As I mentioned earlier, whoops, see if I can go back one slide there. There we go. We're going to talk about the Magenta, Italy crash. And again, this occurred on June 13th, 1933, outside Milan, Italy, near the town of Magenta. The craft was recovered by the Benito Mussolini's regime, Il Duce, for those of you that are history buffs. And according to eyewitness accounts, the craft was saucer-shaped, approximately 10 meters wide, and contained non-human occupants. Now, there is no word about what those occupants looked like or what was done with them, but Mussolini instituted a complete silence directive regarding the matter, and the craft was reportedly housed at the SIAI Marchetti hangars at Vergiate. Shortly after World War II began, the craft was passed to the Third Reich for further research. The craft was allegedly obtained from the Nazis sometime between late 1944 and mid-1945 by U.S. Armed Forces with assistance from the Vatican. And in 2023, David Grush goes on the record in July of 2023 during his congressional hearing where he is under oath, and he states that the incident did indeed happen and that the craft remains, as far as he is aware, in the possession of the United States government to this day. No official U.S. government source has confirmed the veracity of Grush's claims, although Italian researchers claim to have the documents to confirm the story. And that's one that we're going to be keeping our eyes on for sure. So here's a couple of World War II era incidents. The Cape Girardeau, Missouri incident occurred in April of 1941. And that was when a saucer-shaped craft crashed in a farmer's field, and Reverend William Huffman was called to the scene to administer last rites to the strange humanoid occupants of the craft. Two of the occupants were dead when he arrived on the scene, but one was still conscious, though severely injured. The occupants were described as being 3 to 4 feet tall, with abnormally large heads, big black eyes, and long, spindly arms. The Army arrived, closed off the scene, swore neighbors to secrecy, took the craft, and buried the deceased occupants on the property. Several years later, when news of this incident broke out into the mainstream, the person that currently owns the property stated that somebody came and exhumed whatever was in that grave, and it's now gone. So who knows where that ended up. But William Huffman, the Reverend's granddaughter, confirms that the event really did happen. And it is said that Reverend Huffman struggled for years trying to reconcile and process what he had experienced. Here's a list of some of the prominent UAP UFO incidents that occurred in the World War II and post-World War II era. First, we have the Battle for Los Angeles. Now, there was a really kind of B movie that was made several years ago, but that's not what I'm referring to. There was actually an incident called the Battle for Los Angeles that occurred between 24th and 25th of February, 1942, where strange aircraft appeared above Los Angeles. And bear in mind, we had just declared war. We had just entered war with Japan and Germany and Italy. And so we had defensive positions in the city of Los Angeles, and military artillery began opening fire. And whatever these craft were, they were apparently impervious. And from what I understand, millions of rounds of ammunition was spent to take down these strange aircraft that were somehow able to evade all of the artillery and flak that was sent up in their direction. That's called the Battle for Los Angeles. Then, of course, we have the Trinity UFO incident in August of 1945. That was when they were testing the atomic bomb down at the Trinity site in New Mexico. And the story goes is that when they were detonating the bombs, UFOs appeared. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Then we have what a lot of people call the first modern era UFO sighting. Kenneth Arnold. Anybody ever heard of Kenneth Arnold? Good. So Kenneth Arnold, he had his sighting June 24th, 1947, just about a week before the incident happened in Roswell. And he reported seeing several craft that he described as kind of like a boot heel and also like a saucer that was end on end like that. And then, of course, in July 47, we have Roswell. And we'll talk about Roswell in a moment. But the other significant one is McMinnville, Oregon in May of 1950. That was a farmer, a rabbit farmer in McMinnville, Oregon, and his wife were out feeding their rabbits, and they saw classic flying saucer-shaped craft, and they were able to capture multiple images on film. And before I show you what those images look like that the farmer took in McMinnville, to this day, nobody in the government and no scientist has been able to debunk it. It passes every test so far. It is considered one of the most compelling and actually clear photos that we have of a quote-unquote flying saucer. Then we had the Washington, D.C. UFO flap between the 12th and 29th of July, 1952, where UFOs appeared over our nation's capital to the extent that they actually scrambled military jets to intercept it. And the jets were unable to do so. And we're talking flying right over the Capitol, the White House, and everything. They were flying in and out of secured airspace with absolute impunity. Then we have the Kingman, Arizona crash in May of 1953. Ubatuba, that's a fun name to say. Brazil, September 1957, happened in Brazil. And then, of course, the famous Betty and Barney Hill incident, which is considered to be one of the first modern-day reported UFO abduction stories, took place in New Hampshire in September of 1961. Here's a quick image of what the artist's rendering of what Kenneth Arnold saw. And again, this was roughly 1 week before Roswell. And then we have, of course, many of you have probably seen this, the famous front page report of the Army Air Force capturing a flying saucer. And of course, we all know what happened in the wake of that. Oh, it's just a weather balloon, and gosh shucks, wasn't that fun though? So that was a pretty significant one. And here is a photo of McMinnville. Again, I apologize you can't see him too well on here, but those three photos right there are to this day considered one of the most legitimate photos of an exotic craft that we still have no explanation for. It was filmed on film, so obviously with the digital, being in the digital age, it's easy to hoax and tweak stuff. Couldn't do that back in 1950, especially a rabbit farmer and his wife took that photo, and it still holds up today. Then after that, getting into the 1960s, we have some other significant events. Socorro, New Mexico in 1964. That's where a New Mexico patrolman actually saw a UFO, an egg-shaped UFO, landed on the side of the road, and he saw several occupants, humanoid-looking occupants, on the ground. And we'll talk about that one in a moment. Then there was the Big Sur UFO Vandenberg missile base incident, where the U.S. military sent a dummy nuclear missile for testing up in the air, and a UAP appeared and literally flew circles around it and began zapping the missile with some kind of an energy ray and caused the missile to explode. And somewhere that film footage still exists. Obviously it's very classified, but we have several. In fact, we have one of the officers that was there during that exercise filming it is still alive. And I think that's Robert Jacobs, I think might be his name. After that, we have, of course, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, December 1965. Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, March of 1967. That's where a UAP appeared above Malmstrom Air Force Base and deactivated 10 nuclear missiles. And that was hidden from our government and only came to light officially on congressional record, what was it, a year or two ago. Then we had Pascagoula, Mississippi in 1973 when two fishermen went to go fishing after work, and a UFO landed, and this robot-type being came out of the craft and abducted the two of them. And if you get a chance to ever read about that story, I highly recommend it. The Pascagoula, Mississippi, it is considered to be one of the more credible UAP abduction stories. Then, of course, we have one of my favorites, the Travis Walton incident that happened in November of 1975. Anybody familiar with Travis Walton? Right on. Anybody get a chance to ever meet Travis Walton? Right. So I had an opportunity to meet Travis Walton a couple of times, and I wasn't sure what to make of his story. But if you ever get to meet Travis Walton, he is the most humble and down-to-earth guy. And when I was listening to him, and I was standing about from me to you, so fairly close distance, just his eyes told everything that I needed to know. I have no question, and I firmly believe that Travis Walton, his story of what happened to him, happened just the way that he says it happened. Also bear in mind that Travis Walton has never failed multiple lie detector polygraph tests, and his co-workers that were with him, their stories match his story, so that is one of the best and most, for me, it's one of the easiest ones to wrap my head around, is the Travis Walton one. And there was a Hollywood dramatized version of his story that came out back in the 90s called Fire in the Sky. It has a guy from The Cutting Edge, D.B. Sweeney. Sorry, my wife likes The Cutting Edge, so it's one of the chick flicks that it's okay for a guy to admit that he likes, right? Right. But that's an interesting movie. Then, of course, we had the Colares, Brazil incident that happened in December 1977. This one's important because it involves an entire town of several hundred people at least that suffered effects of biological effects of having seen a UFO. And if you want to learn more about that, there is a great series on Netflix that George Knapp put out that specifically addresses the Colares, Brazil incident. But that one is a very compelling one. Then in December of 1980, the Rendlesham Forest, UK UFO incident, where a UAP landed in Rendlesham Forest, where the United States had a military base, and that is also one of the more compelling stories about UAPs. Hudson Valley UFO flap of between March 1983 and June 84. And then, of course, the Whitley Strieber incident happened in December of 1985. And Whitley Strieber, of course, is the famous author who wrote the New York Times best-selling book Communion. And that's another one that involves an abduction story. So, to review some of that, Socorro, New Mexico incident, Patrolman Lonnie Zamora, that's an artist rendering, obviously, but that's what the craft was like that he saw, and he saw some beings that were outside of that as well. Kecksburg UFO, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. There was a large object, unknown object, that was seen coming in over Canada, and it made multiple course adjustments, and it crashed in the field in the middle of this very small town called Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Within less than an hour, if I remember correctly, the United States military showed up and completely shut everything down, and witnesses say that the craft that they eventually carried out looked like that. And of course, obviously, that looks like a big acorn, right? So it also has appearances to something that the Nazis were apparently working on called Der Glocke, or the bell. But wait, there's more. This brings us to more of the modern cases. So obviously, we have the Calvine, Scotland UFO incident in August of 1990, and you're going to see a photo of that here in just a moment. Like the McMinnville, Oregon photo, this photo from Calvin, Scotland is really, really compelling and relatively clear. Then we have the aerial school incident that occurred in Rua, Zimbabwe in September of 1944, where almost 100 school children and school staff witnessed a UFO landing in broad daylight on the school grounds. Several non-human beings came out of the craft and communicated with the children. This is one of the most credible, absolutely jaw-dropping incidents that has happened in the last 50 years. And there's a film about it that I'm going to talk about a little later. Then we have the Varginha, Brazil incident in January of 1996. This one, along with aerial school, is one of the most compelling UAP, non-human intelligence incidents that has ever occurred that we are aware of. It is where a cylinder-shaped UAP crashed in a farmer's field outside of Varginha, Brazil, and at least 3 of the occupants, non-human occupants, survived. And these occupants were seen by several people in the town, including 3 sisters and a neurosurgeon and hospital staff. And we very recently, and Ben can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Minister of Defense of the nation of Brazil confirmed that this incident happened. That's about as big of an endorsement as you can get. But we'll talk a bit about, there's this great documentary that I'm going to recommend at the end that everybody here needs to see. Then, of course, the Phoenix Lights incident from 1997. That's probably the biggest mass sighting of a genuine anomalous craft that has ever occurred that we're aware of, right? And of course, it was downplayed greatly at the time by the Air Force and the military. And in years since, the governor of Arizona at the time was a gentleman by the name of Fife Symington. And he's famous for saying, I'm taking it seriously, and then he holds a press conference and he has his chief of staff come out dressed in an alien costume, making fun of the whole thing, like, hey, you guys are taking this way too seriously, and there's nothing to see here. And then, after he goes and does some time in prison for a corruption charge, upon being released from prison, he does an interview and he comes clean and says, I have to apologize for that press conference because they told me I had to do it. And he says, I myself saw the craft in the sky, and he says it was the biggest thing I have ever seen. It was categorically not aircraft flares, it was not helicopters. And so he finally recanted and said, yes, it was real, I saw it. And then, of course, we have the Vandenberg Red Square incident that happened on Vandenberg Missile Base in 2003, where a large red square about the size of a football field appeared over Vandenberg Missile Base, which is one of the most highly restricted airspaces in the United States, and was seen by multiple people working at the base It hovered there, it was humongous, and then it just shot off instantaneously, which we're going to talk about that observable in a moment. Then in November of 2004, of course, the Tic Tac incident with the USS Nimitz. In November of 2006, there was the O'Hare Airport incident, seen by dozens, if not at least 100 people that worked at O'Hare National Airport in Chicago, where particularly the United Airlines crew people saw this massive UFO, and it just kind of hovered there over the runway and then shot upward at an incredible rate, and it went so fast it literally left a hole in the cloud that it went through. It was like right through the cloud, and you could see how massive in circumference the hole in this cloud was. And then the Gimbal UFO incident in January of 2015 and the Go Fast in March of 2015. Here is a photo of the Calvine, Scotland UFO incident taken by two hikers in Scotland in August of 1990. And just for size comparison, that little thing right there is a British Harrier fighter jet. So that tells you how big this craft was, this diamond-shaped or seemingly diamond-shaped, kind of type thingamading there. Now this is an artist's rendering of the Virginia incident. The craft did not look anything like that. It was not a saucer, it was a cylinder-shaped craft, but that is a rendering of what the beings looked like. They were reported as having brown-colored skin. They had a terrible ammonia-like smell that accompanied them. They had red eyes, and they had not three horns, but kind of like three, I guess the best way I could describe them would be like cornrows going back on top of their heads. And one of them died while in custody, and an autopsy was performed on one of them by a doctor. And we have the testimony of that doctor that conducted the autopsy in one of these documentaries we're going to talk about. And of course, we have a rendering of what the Phoenix Light incident looks like. Nice and big there over the sky of Phoenix. The Tic Tac video, I'm sure most of you have probably seen that. And from the USS Roosevelt, the gimbal video, which I think is the more impressive of the three of them, because it shows what appears to be a classic saucer-shaped craft. And then the Go Fast video. So, naturally, where is the proof? How do we know that any of this stuff is actually real? Well, for starters, we have whistleblower testimonies, particularly by David Grush, and also Commander David Fravor and Ryan Graves. We have congressional hearings that were conducted in 2023, 2024, and 2025, featuring sworn under oath testimony by people with direct knowledge of UAP incidents. We have recent films, Age of Disclosure, Moment of Contact, and of course, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which takes place right here in Utah. President Trump ordered the declassification and release of all files pertaining to UAP and non-human intelligence. And we're going to talk about that directive in just a moment. And the first release of UAP files under President Trump's directive occurred on May 8th of this year, just a couple of weeks ago. So, what was President Trump's program called? It's called PURSUE. PURSUE stands for the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. And again, it was issued on May 8th, 2026 by President Trump. And the first release consisted of 161 previously classified UAP documents, photos, and videos. So, the first one had the 161, and one of the more interesting takeaways from that treasure trove of releases confirmed, among other things, previous reports that the Apollo astronauts did, in fact, see UAP during their lunar missions. And NASA kept this information from the public for over 50 years. In fact, they outright lied about it. They said, no, our astronauts saw nothing of the sort, despite having astronauts like Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the last man, I believe, to walk on the moon. You also had Neil Armstrong, who made references to having seen stuff while they were up there. And we have photos, as if that wasn't enough. We actually have the photos that were taken by the crews of Apollo 11. That's the one that contained Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins that landed on the moon and walked in July of 1969. We have the photos of some of the UAPs that they saw from the surface of the moon, as well as from Apollo 17, which was the final Apollo mission that went to the moon. And then we have an old file that dates back to 1948, and I found this one really interesting, that detailed multiple UFO incidents occurring in Sweden. And I'm going to read you a quote from that document. It says, they have been reported by so many sources and from such a variety of places that we are convinced that they cannot be disregarded and must be explained on some basis, which is perhaps slightly beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking. The report goes on to say that Sweden's intelligence services were consulted on the matter, and they advised Air Force officials that, quote, these phenomena are obviously the result of a high technical skill which cannot be credited to any presently known culture on Earth. And that was from Sweden's intelligence officials to the Army Air Force in 1948, or I guess the Air Force by 1948. So let's talk about the modern day secret and sometimes not so secret government programs. There are 4 of them we're going to discuss: OSAP, ATIP, UAPTF, and AARO. OSAP stands for the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program that took place between 2008 and 2010. ATIP is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which existed from 2007 to 2017. The UAP Task Force, which was from 2017 to 2022, and the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, which was formulated in 2022 and still exists to the current day. OSAP. OSAP was run by the Defense Intelligence Agency, or the DIA. It was managed by Dr. James Lakatsky, and it was directed by a gentleman by the name of Jay Stratton. Anybody heard that name? All right, yeah, can I get, yoo-hoo, yeah, all right, there we go. We love Jay. So OSAP received a $22 million funding by Senator Harry Reid, who at the time was the Democratic majority leader in the Senate from the state of Nevada. And he received assistance from Senators Ted Stevens, a Republican from Alaska, and Daniel Inouye, a longtime Democrat serving as a senator from the state of Hawaii. And the contract was awarded to Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Space Studies, or BASS. OSAP included research that was done at Skinwalker Ranch, right here in Utah, but it was not limited to Skinwalker Ranch. OSAP resulted in a 260,000 case database on UAP and associated phenomena, and 38 official Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, or DIRDs. That's kind of a fun word to say, right? DIRDs. And also included cases that were investigated at Skinwalker Ranch. ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was non-classified, unlike OSAP, and was a non-publicized program within the DoD, the Department of Defense, to study UAP. The DoD claims ATIP was terminated in 2012, although several people tied to the program state that it was active in some form until 2017. This was confirmed in 2020. Jay Stratton and Lou Elizondo worked in the ATIP program. The program resulted in a 494-page report called the 10-month report, which remains classified to this day. ATIP gave way to the UAP Task Force. The UAP Task Force was directed by Jay Stratton out of the Office of Naval Intelligence. It included a whole of government approach. And it was pretty ingenious because what Jay did is he basically took he took advisors from 16 of the most important agencies and intelligence communities within the United States, and really that was how he organized the people that he felt would best be suited to help him get some traction on figuring out the UAP mystery. Some of the people, it was formed in the wake of ATIP, and the New York Times article was one of the things that spurred on the formation of the UAP task force. Some of the people who worked on the task force under Jay Stratton were David Grush, as well as Dr. Travis Taylor, one of my favorite people, Dr. Eric Davis, Dr. Hal Puthoff, and Dr. Gary Nolan, all of whom we're going to talk about in just a moment. The UAP task force was extremely effective in gathering anomalous data, and it became AARO in 2022. So AARO is the organization that still exists today. It was formed to become the catch-all agency for official UAP reporting and investigation for the US government, and is currently run by John Kozlowski. It has become crippled recently by bureaucracy and accusations of obstructing and discouraging serious investigation, as well as mistreatment of whistleblowers. There has currently been a bill proposed by multiple members of Congress to defund AARO because of that. And AARO's first director, Dr. Sean Kilpatrick, had a reputation for summarily dismissing and debunking UAP claims with little to no explanation, and has been accused of lying to the press and to Congress about legitimate anomalous phenomena. And that is a story that continues to develop. So there were 6 observables that we got from the UAP task force regarding the characteristics, the physical performance characteristics of UAP can be broken down into 6 different categories: positive lift or anti-gravity, sudden or instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities without signatures, low observability, cloaking and transmedium travel, and biological effects. So the positive lift or anti-gravity is objects hovering or maneuvering without any visible flight surfaces, no wings, flaps, rotors, or exhaust plumes. And UAP seem to be defying the natural effects of Earth's gravity without any obvious means of doing so. The instantaneous acceleration, ability to change speed and direction immediately, seemingly defying the effects of inertia and gravity. A sudden change in velocity. What we are seeing with UAP are vehicles that can make immediate right-angle turns, instantaneously accelerating and or stopping on a dime at speeds up to 10 times faster than the SR-71 Blackbird. So we're talking 40,000 miles per hour at least. Hypersonic velocities without signatures, the ability to travel at speeds exceeding current known aircraft and ballistic speed limitations without any correlating heat signatures. Our current fastest aircraft can go roughly 4,600 miles per hour, and the UAP currently being observed are traveling at 40,000 and sometimes faster. Low observability or cloaking, difficulty in being tracked by radar or seen with the naked eye, often seemingly cloaking or blending into disappearing into the environment. All technology has a signature of some kind. Contrails, a sonic boom, wake if it's in the water, right? And UAP exhibit none of those signatures and have often been reported to simply disappear in the blink of an eye. Transmedium travel, the ability to move seamlessly between space, air, and water. Traveling from air to underwater or vice versa without producing so much as a splash and without losing any velocity. Absolutely zero compromise of performance in traveling through different media, whether that's space, air, or water. And finally, biological effects. Reports of physical effects on observers of UAP, such as radiation burns, scarring, temporary loss of vision, hearing, and memory, or sometimes referred to as lost time. Proximity to UAP resulting in autoimmune diseases, blood disorders, and neurological or psychological damage. So let's talk about the fun stuff, the hypotheses, particularly as it pertains to where do these things come from? What are they? What is their origin? And there's essentially 8 accepted theories. And I say theories because not a single one of these has been proven with any degree of specificity or conclusivity. Number 1, that these UAPs or UFOs are a top secret or black project, meaning it's our own American military testing next generation and beyond flight systems. Number two, the one that we better all hope and pray it is not, is foreign adversary like China, Russia, or even one of our allies, meaning that they have somehow leapfrogged us technologically, and that's a pretty scary thought to have. Third is that maybe it's just some wealthy oligarch or some billionaire, maybe somebody on the order of an Elon Musk, has developed breakthrough technology. And that's what we're seeing flying in the skies, doing these amazing maneuvers. Fourth is the one that most people tend to move toward, and that is what we call the ET hypothesis, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which states that these craft are of an off-world origin from another planet, another solar system, or maybe even another galaxy, the ET hypothesis. Number five is one that I lend a little personal bias to. It's called the crypto-terrestrial, or some people call it the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. And this is that it would be presumably an advanced non-human intelligent species native to Earth that has been here before us and or possibly alongside us throughout history. In other words, it could be a species that is native, just as native to planet Earth as we are. And presumably because of their advanced intelligence and technology, they're able to largely remain hidden from us, except for circumstances where they want to be seen or we happen to catch them with our technology. Number six is the interdimensional hypothesis, which posits the theory that these are advanced beings that come from other dimensions other than our three-dimensional space that we all reside in, this collective reality, if you will. Now, the only problem with the interdimensional hypothesis is that it has never been conclusively proven that other dimensions exist. Mathematically, there's a well-known physicist by the name of Michio Kaku, who is a great resource on this. I recommend reading what he has to say on this particular hypothesis, but states that these things, one of the possible explanations could be that they're interdimensional. And then number seven is that, well, it's a little simpler than that. These things are either angels or demons. And this is a hypothesis that is driven largely by the person's own particular spiritual or religious bias that they have. There are some instances where people, whether it's Christian or otherwise, they just can't accept the fact that there is anything greater than humanity. There's God, and then there's humans, and there's nothing else. So that's one of the other theories, that these are either angels or demons. And then finally, we have what is called simulation theory. And the best way to describe what simulation theory is that we are living in the matrix, and that everything that we experience in our lives is the result of a simulation. How many of you have seen the Matrix? Has it ever felt like that sometimes, that maybe we are living in the Matrix? And particularly the second Matrix film, Matrix Reloaded, really kind of dives into that. So those are the main hypotheses of what the origin of these craft might be. Now, speaking of the angels and demons, this is a statement that was released just 2 days ago by the Roman Catholic Church. The chief exorcist of the Roman Catholic Church in the Diocese of Washington, D.C., went on a major mainstream news program and said definitively, we shouldn't be looking at UFOs and UAPs because they are demons, they are satanic. It is Satan trying to deceive us. Well, the Archbishop fired the Catholic Church's top exorcist for saying that. And they said, I don't know if you can read it, but basically he says, he was basically speaking out of turn, and this is not at all the viewpoint of the Catholic Church or the Pope. We do not term these things to be demonic or satanic. And that came out just 2 days ago. So, we're going to talk about who's who. These are some of the faces. For those of you that are new to the topic, one of the big downfalls is that there's a lot of people out there that will talk and will tell a great story, and they'll say, I have the proof. What I'm telling you is real. And I'm the only authorized clearinghouse for truth when it comes to UAP. Well, I'm going to show you who some of the people are that I know because I have vetted them, and I'm grateful enough that I actually know several of them personally and can speak to the fact that they are men of top honor and top integrity. And not only that, they have the resume of having been in a position within the government or have direct firsthand knowledge of the UAP programs. And the first one at the top of the list is this man right here, Jay Stratton, right? We all love Jay. So who is Jay Stratton? Aside from being a really awesome guitar player. Jay was the first director of the UAPTF. He was in the Defense Intelligence Senior Executive. He was the co-creator of the OSAP and ATIP programs. He is the former senior advisor to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He had over 30 years in senior roles in U.S. intelligence and the Pentagon. He had several combat deployments serving in the Army, and he served 27 years in the U.S. Army and Air Force Reserve. And Jay is somebody who is just now literally starting to come out of the shadows, and we're going to get back to that in just a second here. But if there's anybody that you should take seriously and pay close attention to, it's this man right here, Jay Stratton. And so yeah, he's the first director of the UAPTF and all that. So next we have David Grush. David Grush was a UAP whistleblower and former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer for 14 years, worked under Jay Stratton in the UAPTF. He co-led the UAP portfolio for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, National Reconnaissance Office from 2019 to 2021, and he testified under oath before Congress on July 26, 2023. And he is currently the special advisor to Representative Eric Burleson in the House of Representatives for government transparency and oversight on UAP. I would also add, David Grush is going to be doing a press conference from the steps of the Capitol this Tuesday morning, coming up on Tuesday, and we don't know what all he's going to say, but he says it's going to be pretty substantial. So keep your eyes out for that with David Grush. The next one is a gentleman by the name of Christopher Mellon. Christopher Mellon, his bio, he is the former U.S. intelligence official and Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under the Clinton and Bush administrations, and served 20 years in the U.S. government, including positions at the DoD and on Capitol Hill. He played a significant role in obtaining the public release of the Go Fast, Gimbal, and Tic Tac videos, and to this day he is an outspoken advocate for UAP disclosure. Next we have Dr. Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff has a PhD in physics from Stanford University. He's a world-renowned physicist working on lasers, quantum zero-point energy, and he was a pioneering scientist in the research of remote viewing on behalf of the Army and the CIA. He led a 20-year classified SRI program studying remote viewing and psychic ability, funded by both the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Dr. Puthoff has direct knowledge of the legacy UAP program, and he also consulted for the UAP task force. Next, we have Dr. Eric Davis. Eric Davis has a PhD in astrophysics from the University of Arizona. He was a scientist for the National Institute of Discovery Science, or NIDS, from 1996 to 2002. He was a scientific investigator at Skinwalker Ranch during the Bigelow era, from 1996 to 2002. He works with Earth Tech International and for the Institute for Advanced Studies in Austin, Texas, and he has direct knowledge of legacy and present-day UAP programs. Next, we have Dr. James Lakatsky. And Dr. Lakatsky has a BS and an MS and PhD nuclear engineering, expertise in directed energy weapons and fusion plasmas. He worked for the DIA, program manager, contracted officer, representative security coordinator, and counterintelligence coordinator for OSAP. He ran OSAP. And he was the author of a 4-book series, which, take my cookies off here, these books right here, which we'll get to in a bit. But he details his classified work during the OSAP era. Here is another one of my favorite people on planet Earth. How many of you know Dr. Taylor? Yeah, all right. Doc, we love us some Travis Taylor, don't we? I tell you what, that's right. Okay, I'm a horrible, I can't do Travis as well as Dragon can do. But Dr. Travis Taylor has a PhD in optical science from the University of Alabama, Huntsville, as well as a PhD in aerospace engineering from University of Alabama, Huntsville. He has a BA in electrical engineering from Auburn University, an MS in astronomy from Western Sydney University in Australia. He worked for NASA and the US Army. He was the Chief Science Officer for the UAP Task Force under Jay Stratton, and he is currently the scientific investigator at Skinwalker Ranch right here in Fort Duchesne, Utah. Next we have former Rear Admiral Timothy Gallaudet. And he's a retired Rear Admiral. He has a PhD in oceanography. He is the former oceanographer of the Navy and commander of Naval Meteorology and Oceanography Command. Former acting administrator for NOAA, current CEO of Ocean STL Consulting, and he testified under oath before Congress in November of 2024. Dr. Gary Nolan. This man has perhaps done more to save lives from cancer than anybody currently on the earth. I have a great deal of respect for Dr. Gary Nolan. He's a world-renowned immunology professor in cancer research for the Department of Pathology at Stanford University School of Medicine, BS in biology and genetics from Cornell University, a PhD in genetics from Stanford University. He's the co-founder of the Soul Foundation along with Dr. Peter Skafish. He's contracted currently by the CIA and US government to study biological effects of UAP encounters, and he's an outspoken advocate for UAP disclosure. We also have Dr. Beatriz Villarroel she does her work out of Sweden, most likely. And she has a PhD in astronomy from Uppsala University in Sweden, as well as an MS in physics. She's currently an assistant professor at the Nordic Institute for Theoretical Physics. She is a highly regarded expert in astronomy, also a member of the Soul Foundation, and the reason why she's important for us right now is that she recently published her findings confirming the existence of anomalous objects in low Earth orbit via astronomical photograph plates that were taken in the pre-Sputnik era. And she has had them peer-reviewed, and they have held up to peer review so far. So this is one of the most significant recent discoveries where she confirmed that we had legitimate UFOs appearing in the sky before Sputnik was even launched back in the 1950s, and even earlier than that. Then, of course, we have the OG. That's right, Dr. Jacques Vallée. Now, Dr. Vallée, he has an MS in astronomy from the University of Lille Nord, a PhD in industrial engineering and computer science from Northwestern University. He is a famed UFO researcher and author, and he is the inspiration for the French ufologist in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The character known as Lacombe in Close Encounters was modeled directly after Dr. Vallée. He consulted on remote viewing and Project Stargate for the CIA with Dr. Hal Puthoff, and he is considered the original gangster, the OG of ufology. Another man that I wanted to give some recognition to is named Dan Farah. And Dan Farah happens to be an American film and television producer. He is the director of Age of Disclosure. How many of you have seen Age of Disclosure? All right, most of you. Awesome. He's also the producer of Ready Player One, which I know at least one of my sons is a big fan of Ready Player One. I'm a huge 80s pop culture fan, so I loved Ready Player One, and Dan Farah was the producer for Ready Player One. He graduated from Hofstra University. We also have James Fox, another filmmaker. James Fox is an English-born American filmmaker, directed the landmark UAP documentaries The Phenomenon, The Program, and Moment of Contact, New Revelations of Alien Encounters, which I know Ben is a big fan of. And he is also an outspoken UAP disclosure advocate. Speaking of OGs, we have the great George Knapp. And George Knapp, He's a world-renowned American investigative journalist, a news anchor, talk radio host, podcaster, and author, and just all-around awesome guy. It was George Knapp who broke the story about Bob Lazar in 1989 and the whole Area 51 thing. Bob is a two-time Peabody Award winner and a two-time Edward R. Murrow Award winner. Those are two of the most prestigious awards that journalists can win. It's kind of their equivalent of a Grammy or an Oscar. So George is a big deal, well respected by his colleagues. He, of course, is a high-profile UAP disclosure advocate and is one of the world's leading Skinwalker Ranch subject matter experts. And George currently works at KLAS TV in Las Vegas. So let's just quickly talk about this strange piece of real estate that we have here in the state of Utah called Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch is a 512-acre property located near Fort Duchesne, Utah. It is currently owned by Brandon Fugel, and it is considered the world's most active UAP and strange phenomena hotspot. Some people call it a paranormal Disneyland because there's a little bit of everything that goes on there. It is ground zero of one of the most intensive and in-depth scientific investigations in the world into UAP and associated unexplained phenomena. It is currently the setting of the History Channel's The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch hit docuseries, currently airing its 7th season. Anybody watch The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch? Just a couple of you? Good to see. So, we talked about the UAP Disclosure Act just a short while ago. The original UAP Disclosure Act came out in 2023 and was authored by Senators Chuck Schumer of New York and Mike Rounds of South Dakota. So you had both a prominent Democrat and a prominent Republican, truly bipartisan support here. The UAPDA contained enhanced whistleblower protections. It had a clause for eminent domain for the seizure of privately held exotic materials. In other words, there are reports that all of the really good stuff, all of the retrieved UFO wreckage is currently in the hands of specific defense contractors and not per se the US government. And so this eminent domain clause would have made it possible for Congress to say, okay, we're going to approach this particular defense contractor and say, you now have to hand over everything that you have. So it also contained the scheduled release of all UAP files going back to 1947 to be declassified. Any UAP incident that is over 25 years old, according to the UAPDA, and this is part of it that actually passed, was signed into law by President Biden in 2023, I believe, but stated that any UAP incident older than 25 years has to be automatically declassified and made available in the National Archives for the public to review unless it contains national security implications that cannot be released. In which case, if there are, the CIA and the associated agencies had 6 months to explain why to the public that they cannot be released. And quite obviously, nobody in government took that seriously until President Trump recently did his thing there. Now, this UAP Disclosure Act mentioned non-human intelligence 20 times in the bill's language. Think about that. An actual piece of legislation co-authored by the most senior Democrat serving in the Senate and one of the most prominent Republicans was entered into congressional record over 20 times the usage of the phrase non-human intelligence. Why would they include that language if they didn't have good reason to put that in there? Think about that. And lastly, the bill failed in the House of Representatives, and we know specifically, and I'm not trying to point any fingers here, in the interest of full transparency, I am a political independent. I'm neither a Republican or Democrat, proud of the fact that I'm an independent. But it was the Republican constituents, specifically the Republicans that served in areas where several of the defense contractors were based, and they are the ones that torpedoed the passage of the UAPDA and have continued to do so since 2023. So here are some key points to remember that I would use as recommendations as we wrap everything up here. First of all, I want all of you to remember when somebody says UAP, it does not and should not automatically equate to aliens, ET, or little green men. When we talk about UAP, all we know is that they are unidentified anomalous phenomena. It doesn't mean that they're automatically extraterrestrial. Non-human intelligence, or NHI, is the new accepted nomenclature for what has traditionally been referred to as aliens or ET. And that's why they keep using the term NHI in every official release and not aliens or extraterrestrial. This is because we do not know, again, the actual origin of NHI. We are likely dealing with multiple races and therefore multiple origins of non-human intelligence. And perhaps the biggest piece of advice that I can share would be to avoid confirmation bias. And confirmation bias swings both ways. If you have confirmation bias, if you're convinced, if you just absolutely believe these things are from another planet, these are ETs, and nothing you say can convince me, that's confirmation bias. But also, if your viewpoint is this is all BS and nonsense, and it's just there's perfectly prosaic and mundane and rational explanations, and I'm never going to open up the door to the possibility that it's anything other than good old-fashioned high advanced technology. That's also a form of confirmation bias. So the big thing is just pay attention. My wife just said son to me. What did you say? But seriously, folks, do your best to avoid confirmation bias. Keep an open mind. It is okay to be skeptical, but there is a marked difference between being skeptical and being a skeptic. That difference being, if you are a skeptic, that means you've shut the door. That means that you've already made up your mind and you really don't care what may actually be out there. Being skeptical, on the other hand, says, show me the data, show me how you arrived at that conclusion, and then I'll review that data and I'll take it into account before I formulate my own conclusion. So nothing at all is wrong with being skeptical, but do not be a debunker, don't be a skeptic, because they're the people that have decided this is all settled, nothing you say is going to convince me. These are people that if you were to bring them an actual NHI and put it in front of them, they would still deny it and say, yeah, sorry, no, not going to believe it. And there's not really a whole lot you can do with those people. They're just going to have to figure out another way or let history pass them by. So, in closing up here, I wanted to recommend a couple of films. First of which is Age of Disclosure. Is there anybody here that has not seen Age of Disclosure? Okay, so Age of Disclosure is currently available on both Amazon Video and I think also Apple TV for rent or for purchase. Folks, this documentary, Age of Disclosure, is the game changer. It changed everything pertaining to the conversation. It is, without question, all that I can say is go see it, make the time, spend the money. It is well worth the investment. Age of Disclosure is my #1 recommendation. Number 2, and this here is Age of Disclosure. That's what the poster looks like. Number 2 is Moment of Contact, New Revelation of Alien Encounters. Came out in 2025, directed by James Fox. This contains the in-depth investigation into the Varginha, Brazil incident. And I used to be on the fence about what to believe about the Varginha, Brazil incident. After watching this, the director did such a good job. He found all the people that are still alive, that were there, that had direct, first-hand contact, hands-on contact with the non-human intelligent being that they recovered from this crash. So that's another one I highly recommend. Moment of Contact, New Revelations of Alien Encounters. The next one is The Phenomenon, also by James Fox. This one is currently available for free on Amazon Prime Video. You can watch it for free right now. This came out in 2020 and it was just fantastic. It contains great interviews with Senator Harry Reid and others. Another excellent video to watch. And the final one from James Fox is called The Program, that came out in 2024. And this also is a great background into how we got to where we are today in the conversation. And finally, the last film I wanted to talk about is called The Aerial Phenomena. It came out in 2022, and it is the official documentary of the aerial school incident that happened in Rura, Zimbabwe in September of 1994. And it has all of the children that were involved coming in as adults and revisiting what they saw. And as you watch these children give their testimony, much like I experienced with Travis Walton, you see it in their eyes. You hear it in their voice. They saw everything that they claimed to have saw. They felt it, and this is a really powerful film, also currently available on Amazon for rent or purchase. And I got to give a shout out to The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And of course, we have two wonderful gentlemen here with us today from Skinwalker Ranch. Of course, we have the great Ben Woodruff over there, biologist that does work with The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And the always awesome Mr. Chris Roberts, the staff archaeologist at Skinwalker Ranch, is joining us today. And so The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch airs every Tuesday on the History Channel. It is currently in its 7th season, and it is, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is one of the best docuseries out here. What I can tell you about The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, it is not a scripted show. It is just as everything happens, and the men that work out there are among the highest caliber, men of great honor and integrity. Cannot recommend that show enough. And then finally, here's some recommended reading. I've got some books here that you guys can take a look at. We have The Day After Roswell, which is a great book by Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso. And then we also have Crash at Corona by Don Berliner and Stanton Friedman. The Hunt for the Skinwalker by Colm Kelleher and George Knapp. This is the book that started me down the rabbit hole for Skinwalker Ranch in 2006. This is a really fun book to read through. And then we have probably what I would call the Bible for anybody that really wants to understand not just Skinwalker Ranch, but also a really in-depth, substantiated report on phenomena. Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by Dr. James Lukatsky, Colm Kelleher, and George Knapp. And then also Initial Revelations, New Insights, and Future Visions, all by Dr. James Lukatsky. Roswell, the After Action Report by a great man by the name of Greg Lawson, one of the best, more recent books to be written about Roswell. And then finally, Passport to Magonia by the OG himself, Jacques Vallée. And just announced this last Wednesday, Jay Stratton is finally publishing, yes, Jay Stratton and his book, Out of the Shadows, Revealing the Truth About Non-Human Intelligent Life. And Jay Stratton, as you can see here, the most senior U.S. official to investigate unidentified anomalous phenomena. This book is currently available for pre-order on Amazon and through HarperCollins, and it comes out officially on the 13th of October. And that's going to be the most anticipated book of the year. And I guarantee you, folks, now, I haven't had a chance to read Jay's book yet, but I guarantee you, just because of the man that I know Jay to be, this book is going to do as much for mainstreaming the conversation about NHI and UAP as Age of Disclosure has done as well from the film standpoint. So there's also some podcasts that I would recommend if those of you are into podcasting. The first one is the J Free 906 podcast, which is brought to you by a very dear friend of mine by the name of Mr. Jeff Freeman. And he covers The Curse of Oak Island, but also Skinwalker Ranch, and he's also just starting to cover the UAP topic, and his podcast is found on YouTube, and I cannot give that one a high enough recommendation. Next, we have Area 52, which Ben has appeared on recently. Area 52 is a very popular podcast hosted by a gentleman by the name of Chris Ramsey, and that's also on YouTube. And then I got to give a shout out to the Micah Hanks program. Micah is another very dear friend of mine and is a bandmate of mine in Hitchhiker. And his podcast, he covers all kinds of great stuff from UAP. Micah is also the co-creator and editor-in-chief of The Debrief, which is one of the most highly regarded scientific publications. And then there's the American Alchemy podcast, also on YouTube. Weaponized, of course, which features George Knapp and his co-host Jeremy Corbell on YouTube. And then if you prefer more of an audio-based podcast, there is a great podcast called Ghosts in the Mountains, which is hosted by Caleb Hanks, the brother of Micah, and also a very dear friend of mine. And they cover everything from ghosts and legends of strange and unusual things. Really, really well-produced podcast, and you can find that on YouTube and Apple. And then finally, there's this thing that I call the Cheap Ass No Frills podcast, also known as The Soul of the Unexplained, which is the podcast that myself and Mr. John Nyberger, John, raise your hand there. People can see you there. John, and we also have joining us on the podcast, Johnny Stratton, Jay Stratton's son, and my good friend Roger Stokes. And our podcast is also hosted on YouTube. So, what can you do? Well, number one, I would say educate yourself. Read the suggested books and watch the suggested films and documentaries, especially Age of Disclosure and Moment of Contact. Cannot reinforce that enough. Avoid developing confirmation bias, be open-minded, and follow the hard data. Demand that your investigations and the people that are doing the investigations, making the claims, that they have the data to back up their claims. Talk about it. Ask your friends, family, coworkers what their thoughts are on the UAP phenomena and NHI. Start those conversations. That's the way we mainstream it. That's the way that we help to destigmatize it, is to just talk about it. And great conversation starters, especially around the holidays. Right? I guarantee you conversations are going to go a lot better talking about UAPs and NHI than talking about politics. Secondly, join MUFON. Dustin, raise your hand there. Mr. Dustin Eskelson, the director of the Utah chapter of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, is also an extremely valuable resource where you can find all kinds of data on citizen-based UAP incidents, and you can join MUFON, and just a great organization to be a part of. Cannot recommend it highly enough. And also become a Skinwalker Ranch insider. Do we have any Skinwalker Ranch insiders here? Okay, I see 1, 2. John, you can't raise your hand. Ben, you can't raise your hand. Chris, don't raise your hand. So we'll talk about that in a... What? They really are insiders, yes, the very definition. So, and also listen to credible podcasts. And no, I'm not saying my podcast is credible. In fact, if you listen to it, you'll know where anything... My New York side comes out a lot on that podcast, much to the chagrin of my dear wife. But there's a lot of great podcasts out there, in addition to the ones that I recommended. And finally, call or write your congressional representatives and tell them to push for government transparency and disclosure. And some information about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, founded in May of 1969. Nonprofit, civilian-driven organization. This is the largest resource of UFO data. Utah chapter led by this amazing gentleman, Dustin Eskelson. If you want more information, go to MUFON, www.mufon.com. And they also maintain a presence on Facebook. And for those of you that didn't get a good look at Dustin Eskelson, there he is right there, next to that weird-looking fella in the funny hat. And then the Skinwalker Ranch Insider Program. Wow, another scary guy. So become a Skinwalker Ranch Insider. Go to www.skinwalker-ranch.com/insider. It is $12 if you want to go for a monthly subscription, or $96 if you want to go for a full year. If you do the $96 option, they give you a free t-shirt, which I don't have because I do the monthly thing. 24/7 access to cameras at Skinwalker Ranch. How cool is that? This is unprecedented what we get with the Skinwalker Ranch Insider Program. You get 24/7 access to the cameras at Skinwalker Ranch. And as Chris and Ben can tell you, Insiders are responsible for noticing some of the most extraordinary anomalies that appear on Skinwalker Ranch because those cameras run 24/7 and there are people literally from all over the world that are watching those cameras. You also have access to exclusive data from the investigations directly from Eric Bard. And every week that the series is airing, there is a Q&A every Thursday night with the team members. In fact, just this last Thursday, we had Ben on, and Chris was on, and Dr. Travis Taylor joined us for a bit. Brandon Fugel was on. And they answer any questions that people have about whatever particular episode had just aired. And on top of that, it's a vibrant and dynamic online community. I've been a proud member of the Skinwalker Ranch Insider community since the very inception of it several years ago. And I can tell you it is one of the most, it's one of the best investments I've ever made as far as my money goes. And I think, Jennifer, even you here, you're an insider as well, aren't you? So yeah, she knows, you know what I'm talking about. It's a fun thing to do. And then lastly, Phenomicon. How many of you have ever been to Phenomicon? Raise your hands. Quite a few of you. All right, John, don't raise your hand. Ben, don't raise your hand. No. So Phenomicon, for those who don't know, is an amazing conference that takes place every September in Vernal, Utah. And this year, Phenomicon runs from September 9th to September 12th. And we have high-profile speakers that come in from every sector of the unexplained. Now, because it happens to be quite literally in Skinwalker Ranch's backyard, we get all the team members of Skinwalker Ranch that appear and do presentations. They teach workshops, all kinds of great stuff. But we also have people from the realm of the paranormal, ghost hunting, psychic mediums. We also have Bigfoot people. We have the folks from Expedition Bigfoot. And just if any aspect of the paranormal, the supernatural, or the unexplained interests you, Phenomicon is truly one of the greatest things. In fact, John and I, we've been going for so long, it's almost like going to a family reunion because of all the great friends that we've made. We love going every year. Vernal is such an amazing town to begin with. The restaurants and just the atmosphere there, we love Phenomicon. And of course, there's also great add-on activities that you can do where you pay a little bit extra to attend dinners or breakfast with somebody like, say, Travis Taylor or Jay Stratton or George Knapp, and you get to hang out with them at this great restaurant and have a great meal with them. And then if you want to learn more about Phenomicon, just go to www.phenomicon.net. There are multiple pass options available. You can get a one-day pass, a Friday and Saturday pass, and a lot of options there, but I cannot recommend Phenomicon enough. So this is just a little photo that I took of the Phenomicon last year, and the people in the back probably can't see, but that's that gentleman right there doing the presentation is sitting right there in that corner, Mr. Ben Woodruff, who gave, and John can back me up here, one of the best presentations I've ever seen in my 6 years going to Phenomicon was offered by Mr. Ben Woodruff last year.
They just spotted themselves in the audience.
What's that?
These guys just spotted themselves in the audience.
Oh, is that you? Well, there you go. And then we also have the Skinwalker Ranch panel. I got to get a picture of Chris. Chris is right there. And so usually on Saturday at Phenomicon is when Skinwalker Ranch do their panel, and it is one of the highlights. Those of you that watch the show and have never had the pleasure of getting to meet the guys from Skinwalker Ranch, they are just like you see them on the show. They are just great guys. They're approachable. They're down to earth. And if you ever get dragging up there with Travis, some of the best comedy you will ever see. They are the funniest guys. They cut each other up all the time. And I had to take a picture of Ben doing his thing there with all of his skulls there. Now, Ben is a man who literally has skeletons in his closet. I think we all know that, right? But Ben, great presentation last year. And here's a shot that I was able to take last year at the backstage. The gentleman here on the left is Paul H. Smith. He very prominent remote viewing expert. He worked for the Army and was involved in the top secret Project Stargate, along with Dr. Hal Puthoff. Of course, the guy in the middle is Jay Stratton, and this big drink of water here is a very dear friend of mine, Mr. Caleb Bench, security there at Skinwalker Ranch. Now, I know a lot of you have probably seen a similar meme to the picture I'm about to show you right now. I'm not saying it's aliens, but, oh, there is one. Look at that. Of course, Giorgio Tsoukalos from Tsoukalos, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Giorgio, okay, from the Ancient Aliens team. And I believe he's coming back to Phenomicon this year as well. Awesome, awesome guy. And then this was from a moment where Travis Taylor was given, he was presented that guitar right there is actually a fully functioning rocket, believe it or not. That Les Paul, who was there last year to watch him launch it? Was anybody there? Couple of you, yeah. So fully functional rocket that these two amazing insiders, PJ and Brian, made for Dr. Taylor. And Travis, as you can see, was just grinning ear from ear. He was like a kid on Christmas to get that. So we also have, again, some of those add-on activities. John, had to take a picture of you. This is from they call it the VIP behind the scenes dinner with the cast of Skinwalker Ranch. And unfortunately, I believe this has actually sold out for the first time in history. But this is a can't miss activity if you ever get the chance, because the team comes in and they show an episode from the most current season of the show, and they give you the behind the scenes to explain maybe what ended up on the cutting room floor, and all the while enjoying an amazing dinner. It's a fantastic dinner included with that. And of course, the rocket launch. We have, of course, the great Pete Kelsey here, Chris Roberts, Tom Winterton, Dragon, Dr. Taylor, and Caleb Bench getting ready to launch a rocket. That's also an add-on activity. I believe they can still catch that. And then, of course, everybody knows the big draw for Phenomicon, Hitchhiker, right? Yeah, thank you, Chris. So for those who don't know what Hitchhiker is a band that I'm fortunate enough to play in. And to give you a quick introduction, over there on the left is Mr. Caleb Hanks, tall drink of water there. Next to him is his brother Micah, and then Dr. Travis Taylor, Jay Stratton, I can't remember that guy, and then we got John Nyberger, bass player extraordinaire. And we are the band known as Hitchhiker, and we are the ones that will be closing out. For the last couple of years, we've closed out the conference. We played covers of classic rock by groups like AC/DC, Ozzy, Kiss, and all kinds of great stuff like that. And here's a couple of action shots of Travis doing his thing and me playing my tambourine. I actually sprained my hand doing that, believe it or not. And there we have a shot of Mr. John Nyberger and his bass right there and whatnot there. And again, Ben Woodruff is also going to be presenting at Phenomicon this year, which we're really excited for. And so, folks, I'd like to give you a closing thought. So, 1,500 years ago, everybody knew that the Earth was the center of the universe, right? 535 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And strangely, there are still more than a few people that still think that. And today, everybody knows that human beings are the only sentient, intelligent life on Earth. Imagine what you will know tomorrow. And so I'd like to finish by just offering some special thanks to, again, the Hutchings Museum for having me out, to Mr. Ben Woodruff, and to the awesome Jennifer Miller. Jennifer, please stand so we can... Jennifer handled everything for the tickets. She is awesome. And we're just so grateful for all the work that Jennifer did behind the scenes to make this happen. Mr. Dustin Eskelson, representing MUFON. Thank you for being here today, Dustin. And a special shout out to my friends Caleb Bench, who sadly wasn't able to make it today, Mr. Chris Roberts, and Brian Arnold, Brandon Fugel, and the entire Skinwalker Ranch team. And most of all of you. Thank you. I'm going to give you a round of applause. So thank you for joining me today. And that wraps up my presentation. Thank you for staying awake. Thank you for not throwing anything at me. And so now, Ben, do we want to do a little quick Q&A?
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I've got some books up here. These are some of the books that I talked about, the Lukatsky books, so you can get a look at what they look like. But any questions?
Since
Yes?
if he's found anything. There's talk of ancient geopolymers also fluorescing, and I'm just wondering what he thinks about that.
So the question is, Chris, would you be able to talk a little bit about the ceramics that were found in the mesa, the fluorescence of them, anything interesting you can tell us from what's already aired, because obviously we can't get some of the interesting stuff here. Chris Roberts, ladies and gentlemen.
So, great question. I'm happy to talk about it because it's pretty exciting. I hate sitting on this stuff for a year. So the ceramic-like material is really very interesting. Coming out from deep within the mesa, and what you noted in that episode where it fluoresced, that is something that's very specific to that material coming out of the mesa, that it fluoresces. Normal sandstone coming off that mesa does not fluoresce. Okay, so that's some information they didn't put in that episode. That material does. That's very dramatic. And seeing the two different types, where we have the type A and the type B, that both fluoresce, but they both fluoresce differently, right? Such as, like you're talking about, like a polymer, that they do fluoresce differently. Now, what you'll notice that I talked about in that, where I almost got Travis to say it's ancient aliens, right? Because he didn't know what to think about that, right? But it's because it has signs of it, which are post-depositional accretions and erosion on the material that are symptoms of something being in the ground for a long time. So when you go, hey, we've got highly technological advanced material here, but it's really ancient, it butts heads. It doesn't make sense logically in any way. Scientifically, it makes us all, we're at a conundrum with that material as to what it is. We have other testing, but that's where we're at right now. But that's kind of something that I can speak to now. It fluoresces, which is another symptom of it. You have the crosshatch patterning. You have the reaction that happened to it under the SEM, right? It is not a natural material that came out of the mesa that is clearly defined as not coming out of the mesa because it fluoresces like that. And it has evidence of being in there longer than 60, 80, 90, 100 years, where you might have that technology, when really the technology we're talking about with this advanced ceramic-like material is less than 100 years ago. So it doesn't really match. So that was kind of the big thing that they put in that first episode, I think it was, where we talked about it and put the black light on it, where it has evidence on it that really shows it's older. So that's where that's at. Any other questions on that? Okay.
Yes. Yep. Chris?
Have him stay up for a minute.
We are now involved in the Chris Roberts Q&A.
Sure.
No. Okay, so in the property that you have access to on the ranch, are you also finding the different ages of, as an archaeologist, are you finding that you're able to identify from different Native American time frames
Yes.
of materials?
Yeah. So that's something we filmed a little bit for it, but it really hasn't shown in the show. But we did this cruise over the winter, and I kind of got the nod from Eric that was like, talk about it. We're not under contract. You can talk about the prehistory there. So what's really dramatic and really awesome at the ranch, and I've said this, it's like a candy land for archaeology. Not Disneyland, Candyland, because it shows almost every period of occupation
They sell candy at Disneyland.
is found on the ranch, going all the way back to Paleo times, Fremont, Archaic, Ute is all there in a certain capacity within a few of the different sites. We're seeing that. And so it's all represented. Everything you see here is represented there, but it's the Uinta Fremont that you have out there. That's the most dominant one that you'll find. And we showed that on, I think Pete put it on. We did some LiDAR work and some 3D imaging. And that's actually Fremont material right there, the metate that's out there. And then there's going to be other things that do come up that we will show, hopefully that will show. But there is almost every single culture in prehistory is demonstrated on the ranch. Now, to speak to that archaeologically, Generally, that's not what you find at archaeological sites or properties. You find archaic lived here, right? Or maybe historic lived here. You got the historic Ute, or you've got the Fremont at this area, but you don't have every layer at a site because during different environments, different cultures lived at that location because it was a nice place to live during that time, but that's all you find. But maybe you can get it back to 5,000 years, and then maybe it went up to 2,000 years ago. And you find that material evidence. But we're finding multiple, I'm talking thousands of years, located at Skinwalker Ranch, which really shows that there, for some reason, people were drawn to that area. It's not that great of an environment, though in the paleo environment it would have been wetter.
What kind of materials from these ancient cultures have you found?
We found lithics, so stone, chip stone, ground stone as well, and ceramics.
So more living as opposed to ceremonial?
That I can't really speak to right now. Hopefully I will speak to it on the show, as far as how you define that more. Yeah.
And are you also able to, because it's on private property, what are the guidelines? Like, are you able to secure and stabilize areas that you may go deeper into in relation to build the story out of some of the history, or?
Yeah, it is. So it is on private land, right? So this is all Brandon's artifacts. It's his material. In fact, some of the materials I've gotten from, like Chris Bartell, previous security guard, he and I are pretty close, and he has basically given me his collection that he found there that he documented really well with GPS locations, pictures, and everything. So it's fantastic that I've got like his assemblage, and even ones that disappeared. Like there was a period where there wasn't very many people at the ranch, and it wasn't Bigelow, and then it was before Brandon really started doing things, and there was a bowl of artifacts that they would just get tossed into. It just kind of either got thrown away or something happened. But he has it all photo documented. So I've got a lot of evidence, which is fantastic, because when he and I met, it was like, to him, it was like finally all this material that I was trying to get Robert Bigelow to pay attention to. Someone is paying attention to it in the investigation. So we can tell the prehistory of Skinwalker Ranch, which is really colorful, and there's a lot there. But yeah, it's lithics, groundstone, ceramics. That's mostly what it is. As far as other dynamics of it, that part is a stay tuned on some of it. And I'm hoping that there will be things shown. We will do more filming this year as well to demonstrate that, because that really rounds out the picture of what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, all the way up to the current period of the people that were there right before Bigelow bought it. You know, it's a long history through prehistory and history of occupation of that place, which again, it's really an interesting location to have that happen at that location. And so it tells something more was going on there than just subsistence.
So in your field of expertise, are you finding that you also find connections throughout other researchers, archaeologists, even state and national archaeologists and systems? Can you tie in movements of cultures or people through?
You see what you see outside of the ranch. Like I've done archaeology all over the Uinta Basin, and you know pretty much what's in the area. What's special about Skinwalker Ranch is it does have some additional things there that you would not normally find just on an archaeological survey. So it's got added things that makes it really rich. So, but it does have what you would expect to find as well. But maybe not to the degree you would expect it to. It may be more specialized.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, any questions pertaining to any of the stuff that I covered in my presentation? Questions for me or for Ben? Or for Dustin with MUFON?
Waste this precious time.
Okay.
You talked about your personal perspective of cultures that may have developed right here alongside us on this planet Earth.
Yeah, the crypto-terrestrial
Yes.
hypothesis, yeah.
Would you develop that a little bit more?
Sure. So the way that I first learned about what has become known as the crypto-terrestrial or ultra-terrestrial hypothesis was actually something that it was a book that I read back right around the time that I discovered the hunt for the skinwalker. So we're talking about 2006, 2007 timeframe. The author is a man by the name of Mac Tonys, and he wrote a book called, I want to call it Stalking the Crypto-Terrestrial or something like that. And basically what his idea was is that maybe what we're seeing with all these UFOs and these accounts of aliens, maybe to make it easier to understand as to why there are reports going clear back to biblical times and ancient Hindu times, which predate Christianity and even Judaism, is maybe we're dealing with a non-human biological sentient civilization that has been here on planet Earth right alongside humans that may even predate the existence of, Homo sapiens or present-day humans. And that would potentially explain why they have such advanced technology. Perhaps there's beliefs that maybe they live underground, like some of the reports that we hear from people that see quote-unquote aliens coming out of underground caverns, especially like Mount Shasta. There's what they call the Shaver Mysteries, the Deros and the Teros. Those would be examples of perhaps crypto-terrestrials. But maybe for folks that have a hard time accepting the fact of how can a civilization travel all that vast distance of light years to get from, say, the Andromeda galaxy or one of the other galaxies to where we are. And what I would say to that is, for starters, you're assuming that a advanced technological civilization that is seemingly hundreds, if not thousands or millions of years advanced technologically beyond us, that they would be coming here through the same conventional means that we would use, right? It would take, several hundred light years. Well, what if they have the ability to fold space and time? What we would call a traversable wormhole, right? So there's a lot of people that still, are holding on to Fermi's paradox and the Drake equation, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying there's other avenues to consider that how some of these non-human intelligences may have been here. Now, I happen to be of the viewpoint that we probably were visited, and I think that is captured in the petroglyphs at McConkey Ranch. I just think that we likely had contact with a non-terrestrial based civilization at least several thousand years ago, but who's to say that they couldn't be visiting us now? One of the guys that I pointed out, Rear Admiral Jimm Kjelgaard, believes very strongly that there are these beings are based underwater, USOs, unidentified submerged objects, right? So think of it that way. If you are a non-human intelligence that want to hide from these barbaric human beings, where is the best place to do it on planet Earth? Provo, Utah? No. Salt Lake City? Definitely not. New York? Absolutely not. The Earth's surface is covered with, 70 some odd % water, and we don't even know we haven't properly mapped our oceans. Still, and we're in the 21st century. We're 26 years into the 21st century, and we still don't know what's in our oceans. So it's very conceivable that if there were such perhaps there's a race of beings, some people tie them into the stories of Atlantis, right? The lost continents of Mu, right? And Lemuria, right? So I tend to believe that there's a little bit of truth in all of those old legends, right? And people have been searching for Atlantis and all these other places for years, but the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, to kind of tie back into that, I think is a great way to explain for people that maybe have a hard time wrapping their head around how a civilization can come from out in the universe, out in the different galaxy, different star system, and maybe that's it. Maybe some of what we're dealing with are an advanced race that is just as native to this planet as we are.